Maybe I'm just staying holiday in. Okay.
You know where you're at,
Yes.
understand what your research is.
Yes. And then, on top of that, you want to make sure that your nature of your project, your team expertise match your project lifecycle. So is it incremental? Is it evolutionary, spiral? Is it traditional project management? You want to make sure that they align. If they don't align, you either change your project lifecycle, you change your team, you teach them, or maybe you change the company that you work for. All right. So we already mentioned that project agile management is adaptive, self-managed. We use speculation instead of planning. Even in traditional management, and that's a point again, going back to the hamper and new clothes. Even in traditional management, you want to be positive, and you go in a meeting, kick-off meeting, and we say, are we on the same page? And everybody says yes, but actually we are not. We have no idea what we're doing, but you want to be positive, you don't want to be a spy or something. They kick you out. All right, so I mentioned that we have decomposition from requirements to the task. So when you start working on the requirements level, you have a high level of certainty. At the best, 70 plus 75 minus 25%. In other words, you're hoping that people know exactly what's going to be delivered, or they're missing some items. In a worst case scenario, they're giving you false or fake requirements. They don't even know, they're just giving you something to get rid of it. That's the worst case scenario. So requirements are expectations. What I mean, I have some need. When you deliver function to me, that function is supposed to satisfy that requirement. Are you with me? So function is the output of the project that will satisfy requirement. When I break down that function, I break it down into user stories and tasks. User stories are end users' experience with the requirements, with the output. And tasks is pretty much work that we need to put together to get things done. So why do we have a high level of risk at the beginning when we start talking about requirements? Anybody?
They're not fully, no.
I'm sorry?
Requirements are not fully.
We don't know requirements. Very good. You appreciate it. Requirements are known. So why we start the project if requirements are known? Because we don't know the job. And let's say you don't have requirements and they're changing all the time and it's a dead-end project, but you're going to still write that course, even though it's their course, because you have a mortgage to pay. And I agree with that. But how about if you turn the tables and you start being proactive and start pushing teams to, and all stakeholders to understand the complexity and risk that you're facing on a given project. So when you engage them at the beginning, when you get to the task level, your risk level should be plus minus 5%. Your uncertainty should be plus minus 5%. That's a well-tuned up project. How many of you deliver projects within plus minus 5% of schedule, budget, scope? Anybody? Good. It's possible if you engage the team. And it's your job as an Agile project manager to be able to pick the tools to engage them. All right, so this is some of the documents that you create, like a requirements list. You build product backlog, which is a kind of an Agile approach. What is the product backlog? List of requirements, user stories developed prioritized by product owner who represents the end user group. At that point, entire risk is on the product owner side. Who is a product owner? Product owner is an expert who represents the end user community in terms of what they want. What is the challenge here? When you go to the company and say, who is the product owner? They usually give you some guy that nobody wants on their team. They just want to get rid of that guy and say, he's the product owner, he's expert. But actually that guy is lost in space as much as you are. So you really need to go back to the end user community and say, who really knows what we are delivering here? And you need to engage those people to build a product backlog. Once you build a product backlog, then you engage team to pick and choose what requirements, user stories, functions they can deliver based on their expertise. And you see, right now, you move the risk from the end user to the team side. And you will find out there, do you have enough expertise to deliver certain project work or not? Again, follow the trail, and we will talk about this, trail issues, assumptions, constraints, and risks. What are the assumptions? Anyway, you nice people, so Mike might answer the question. Assumptions are facts that we consider true for planning purposes. So only for planning purposes, when we speculate, we assume. We assume Mike Mark will be here at 10 o'clock. So right now it's 10 o'clock, I'm not here, so there's no assumption or constraint, he's not here. What is the constraint? Limitation of your project. And then when you move into execution, assumptions should become either constraints or risks. There are no assumptions in execution. And again, that's why it's important that we engage stakeholders in this decomposition process. So we don't go with the assumption like, oh, I didn't know. Nobody told me. Oh, foreigner, I didn't know. That was my excuse for spinning figures and stuff like that. Okay. So we go through the process of decomposition. Some of the tools that I would recommend to you that you explore is like expert customer or product owner. Expert customer is a true expert in what needs to be delivered to the customer. He can really tell you how many buttons the screen should have, how many lines of text that the report will have, etc. He's a true expert. Now, to make sure that you deliver everything, you need to consider extreme customer. What's extreme customer? No, but I like that people use the coffee almost. Okay. Extreme customer is unlikely user of your product, but you still want him inside because maybe he can tell you a certain function or requirement that everybody else thought it's obvious, but they didn't tell you. So by including this guy, he'll just say, are you missing this? Usually they talk about very simple, banal things that everybody's supposed to know, but for some reason we miss them. And then in another situation, when you don't have any expertise, you can act as an end user and you can build personas. Persona is a tool that you engage your end users or team members to act as they are using a certain functional requirement of the project outcome, even though they have never used it in fact. Okay. Good. I mentioned to you that in traditional project management we have a WBS or work model structure. That's a skeleton of the project. In an Agile, we have something called walking skeleton. How much work is done at the beginning of the project? Zero. So when you start working on these requirements that you know and you have expertise, you start building that skeleton. And over a period of time, you're adding more meat, etc., until you finish the project. So in Agile, where is the risk? The risk is toward in the next iteration of sprint, because I only plan for 2-3 sprints ahead. Why? Because we don't have a complete requirement. Things are changing, etc. So my risk is pushed toward the next step, next level of my effort. Why I don't have a risk right now within my iteration? Because based on Agile framework or concept, you're supposed to have stable requirements and expertise in your hand to deliver. So when I'm doing work in Agile environment, that's a minimum amount of risk that I have. The risk is coming later. Also, they call it work inventory. You need to build a work inventory out of stable requirements. And if you really want to take a few notes for my presentation, one of the most important subjects here that I really want to point out is the stability of your requirements. The first thing I engage my end users is, when I meet them, is how many of the requirements are stable. What does it mean stable? They're not going to change more than plus minus 5%. That's a stable requirement. And then we have a routine requirements, and then we have requirements that will change, fluctuate, etc. So you need to engage team and end user particularly to really be honest and say, okay, these requirements will not change. And we miss that part. When we go to speculate or plan our project, we want to be positive, we don't want to press people too much, and we accept whatever they give to us without asking these questions, which means we open ourselves for failure, because if you remember, the risk will happen here later. So one thing that I would recommend to you from this presentation is the ability to address the issue about the stability of your requirements before you even start work. You track down the project progress by looking at how much work is left. That's called burn down chart. Burn down chart will tell you how much work is left. Burn down chart is built during the daily stand-up meetings. So what are the 3 things that I ask my Agile team or Scrum team? Anybody? Go ahead.
What did you do since last meeting? What are you going to do until next meeting? And do you have any blockers in your way?
Or risks. Very good. So, what did you do yesterday? Any risk? What you're going to do today? Those things can happen on a daily or bi-weekly basis, etc. In traditional management, what are the things that I ask my team? What are the things that I ask my team? I ask a few questions such as, what is the percentage complete? What is the new delivery date of your test? How confident are you that you're going to deliver that date in percentage? And what are the risks of success or failure? You see the difference in Agile. I asked you what you did yesterday, any risk, what you're going to do today. In traditional management, percentage complete, what is the new date? How confident are you that you're going to deliver? And what is the risk of success or failure? Because we also have the risk of succeeding, of delivering things, which means I deliver something and now it's too late to change. All right. So eventually we got to the point to build risk log. Risk log is a team effort, and it's supposed to include the risks of all identified by your team, prioritized by your stakeholders, etc. So we usually say, I don't have time to plan, to do it right, but I have time to fix it. So be proactive, prevent, eliminate risks. So let's say, what document I would look to establish my risk ID on your project? What document I connect my risk ID? That's pretty correct. The risk ID is everything. Where do I get my risk ID?
The PMO.
No, he doesn't even know what it is. WBS, work program structure ID or task ID is your risk ID. That's how you connect the two. Okay? All right. So let's say I have a risk. All right. I have a risk A, B, C, D, E, and F. I need 5 volunteers to give me a risk. Go ahead. What's the risk? Give me one risk on your project.
Changing requirements.
That's politically correct. And okay, change requirements. All right, change requirements.
Resources not available.
Lack of resources. Okay.
Change
Anything?
sponsorship.
Okay, change resources.
Change your priorities.
Oh. What do you say?
Priorities.
Priority, changing priorities. These are all good risks, by the way. What else?
Using a tool or an approach you haven't tried before.
Okay. Okay, so can you say lack of expertise?
Lack of leadership support.
No support. Okay, so I will ask you to do that, and then I will ask you, what is the probability and impact? Where do I get probability and impact? I get probability and impact from my previous projects, historic records. So if I have 10 projects, and out of those 10 projects, 2 times I have a lack of expertise, what is the probability that this will happen again on a similar project? 2 out of 10, 20%, right? So let's put some probabilities here. Let's say 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 0.5. All of these are based on historic records. All of these are based on your stakeholder input. I never write these numbers by myself. I always ask team members. And I will tell you some of the tools that we can use. Say the impact. Risk impact is measured in what? If this happens on your project, what will be the impact? In time and money. So let's say, if this is happening, changing requirements, what will be the impact of that? How many days you lose because of that in your project?
5.
5 days. Okay, for the sake of exercise, 10. 10. 10. 5. 10. And then it costs you some money. So let's say it's going to cost you 10K, 5K, 5K, 10K, and then 10K. I have a risk expected value. I'm sorry. I have a risk catalog now. The risk catalog is a list of all the adult risks that can happen on your project. Who builds the risk catalog? Team and project manager, right? What risks? Who owns the risks, by the way? Who owns the risk on your project? That's politically correct. And it depends. I like that. But let's repeat. Who owns the risk? Team. Whoever owns this WDS ID, that's the guy who owns this risk. That's the guy who will tell me about this risk. If I don't have this connection, I'm not going to be able to solve it. They have to participate. They have to tell me what is the risk, probability, impact. And I just sum the numbers. What risks I have to track all the time? Risk associated with what? What risks, as a project manager, I have to have in front of me all the time? The risk associated with. Okay, I like that. You've got so many, but there is something else. Risk, that's too generic, but I like your energy. All that is politically correct, I like it all. Risk associated with critical fact. Risk associated with critical fact. Why? Because if those risks fail, or if I fail any of these risks, I'm going to extend the duration of the project, I'm going to increase the cost of the project, etc. So you gotta be, as a project manager, you gotta have that in front of you all the time. All right. Let's see. Okay, we talked about it. All right. Now, I already mentioned to you that you gotta look at the support and destructive goals of your team. Also, when you look at these issues that are popping up as a risk on your project, you want to see what is the restraining and driving force. Driving force is what's helping you to solve the risk, and restraining force is what is preventing you to solve the problem. For example, we built something in San Diego, and we have a problem to find the technical expertise in San Diego. And we asked HR lady to send some jobs, to post some jobs, and nobody is applying for jobs. Engineering job in San Diego. Why? Because engineering base is East Midwest. California is more like a socializing something like that. And I'm talking about a mechanical engineer, not software engineer, mechanical engineer. So you see, it's a constraint that you have to understand to solve the problem. We are failing to deliver mechanical solution on our project because we have a limited access to the resource within the job market. So we have to ship somebody from East Coast to the West Coast. And you can just think about changing home pricing or whatever, relocation fees, etc. All right. Risk prioritization is a team effort. And again, you should always engage team to contribute because that's a process of buying in. So you outline the risk and then you tell me which of these risks have a high impact, high value on the project in terms of positive, negative impact. You always engage team. One thing that I like about Agile is that Agile brings the fun part back to work. So all these little tools that we use with the post-it notes, etc. I feel like I'm in kindergarten playing again with the cards, etc. And people like to see that, and they're open to communicate. Also, I like to use one of the tools that's called youth mapping. How many of you know what's a youth mapping? Mute mapping is a participation to a given question through the post-it note. You don't talk, which is my favorite approach. First I talk, then you listen, and then you listen and talk. So that's my favorite approach. So if you can bring the team to use its post-it notes and mute mapping, you reduce the level of conflict and intimidation. So you allow team to participate openly, and they say, I think this is a 20% chance of success or failure. If you let people talk, you allow like a group of 15 or 10, let's say 9 to 15 or 11 people that you have in the room, you're going to engage in a conflict that may not be creative all the time. Okay. You're going to prevent it. Any questions? So we have a 40 more, 10 more minutes, 40 more minutes. Okay, risk analysis. We talked about known and unknown risks. What is the most accurate technique? Accurate in terms of estimating. What is the most accurate estimating technique? Bottom up. Why? Because you use the WBS, decomposition process. You decompose to the task level, and then you ask owner of the task to estimate. Very good. We already talked about accuracy of your estimating. When you get to execution, you better be plus minus 5% accurate. Okay? And now we are talking about probability times impact, which is called expected value of the risk. Probability times impact. 20% of 10 days impact is 2 days. 40% of 10 days impact is 8 days. 60% of 10 days impact is 6 days. 80% of 5 days impact is 4 days. And 50% of 10 days impact is 5 days. These are expected value of your risks. Okay? Let's assume that all these risks are part of critical path. We sum them up, 10, 20, 25 days. What is this? Sum of the risk expected value. What did we just calculate? It's called risk. It's called contingency reserve. We just calculated contingency reserve. We will do the same thing for the money part here. And what I do with it, once I calculate this expected value, once I calculate this expected value, assuming they are all on a critical path, I would just plug them at the end of the timeline. And I would say, if my team estimates the new project at this point, this would be the most likely duration. That means optimistic plus contingency is most likely duration of the project. What would be the pessimistic duration of the project? Yes, if all of the risk happens, so I would just sum them up and I would say optimistic and this is pessimistic. I always use range when I represent or present the duration of the project, budget of the project to my sponsor or upper management. You never want to give one number. Why? Because it's not realistic. Even though they want to see one number, but it's not realistic. Why? Because based on risk environment and team expertise, we anticipate that the project will take anywhere from this to this. Again, it's an educated answer. You engage the upper management sponsor with some numbers that are calculated by the team effort. It's not something that like you walk with your hands in your pocket and you say, it's going to take 15 months. You come up with a range. And as time progresses, that range becomes less and less until you deliver. Okay, let's go back to a couple of slides here. Tornado diagram. Again, risk can have a positive or negative impact. And you need to calculate it. The best way to present something is visual first. So use this tool to show complexity of your risk environment of your project. Risk can have a positive or negative impact. Can you give me one example of the tool that we use in scheduling that can bring the positive and negative impact at the same time? Anybody? How about the crashing? You want to reduce duration of the project, you have to pay money for it. Okay? So you can save money by reducing duration of the project, but you got to pay for it. All right, good. Okay, this is what we have calculated here. That's why we're trying to put these numbers. You know, if you can measure it, you can manage. Another tool that I like to use, and I have to say this is my innovation, I never heard anybody using this. When you develop critical path, I would save the file. Let's say you use Microsoft Project. Okay, I don't promote Microsoft Project, but I use. So let's say I use Microsoft Project. I would save that file, and then I would go to the critical path activity, and I would reduce 10% of the duration of those critical path activities, and then I would project to see what is the alternative critical path, because these are the tasks. They don't appear as a critical at this point, but will catch up with you later. So you want to be proactive again and kind of develop that list so you can track performance of those deliverable tasks down the line. In terms of Agile, when you develop your sprint backlog and you have estimates, when you engage to this risk analysis, you may have these adjustment factors as well in place. This is acceptable at the beginning of implementation of Agile. However, after 2-3 months or 6 months, I want you to give me stable estimates how much how much time it will take you to deliver a certain user story. Okay? In an Agile Scrum environment, the risk is very low at the beginning. Risk will spike later, which means you didn't solve the risk from the beginning. If you don't solve risk in the beginning, it will catch up with you later. Okay? So that's why we have to be cautious. Same concept here that we calculated for duration, risk buffer, contingency reserve or buffer, I also call it buffer time buffers, we can use to calculate the budget or expected value in terms of money. 20% of 10,000 is 2,000. 40% of 5,000 is 2,000. 60% of 5,000 is 3,000. And 80% of 10,000 is 8,000, and 50% of 10,000 is 5,000. You sum this up, that's 9, 7, 22. Where do you put this 22,000? That's a reserve. You own that reserve, and it's called contingency reserve. Who owns the management reserve? Sponsor. Very good. Okay, now, in terms of risks, we respond on positive and negative risk. Risk response on positive can be enhance, share, exploit, and accept. And then responses on the negative should be, again, avoid, accept, transfer, mitigate. I'm sure you're PMP, so I'm sure you know this concept. What I want to point out here is that risk has 3 levels. Primary, secondary, and residual risk. Residual and secondary risk. These are also known like a second and third order risk. Primary risk is like okay, I have a change requirement. That's a primary risk. What is the residual risk? Residual risk is a result of your response to the primary risk. So you respond to the primary risk and there are leftovers. The leftovers are residual risk. So there are still leftovers of the primary risk. Secondary risk is when you respond to the primary risk, and then as a result of that response, you have a completely new risk. So when you look at, if you want, again, you want to be proactive in this approach, when you look at the risk responses, you want to make sure that your risk response addresses the second and third level of risk that may come after. In Agile, again, you're responding all the time by slicing decomposition from the product backlog to the sprint backlog to the daily stand-up meeting, sprint reviews, and then the retrospectives. I already mentioned earlier that when you get the risk, when you get assumptions, they're for planning purposes. When you move into execution, assumption becomes constraint or risk. Any questions so far? Leon, how much more time do we have? 15? Very good. All right. So let's go with the wide Delphi method. Wide Delphi method is tool that I use to engage things through mute mapping to reach consensus on a certain thing. So I want 5 volunteers. I need 5 volunteers. Who can volunteer? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Any volunteers there? Anybody? Okay. Mute mapping. Don't ask me any questions. What is the, I want you to write down on a piece of paper, what is the probability that you're going to have change requirements on your next project? Everybody. No, don't say anything. Yes, mute means nobody talks. Okay, okay, so let me review. Okay, control Z. What is the probability that your test plans will be inaccurate on your next project? Probability. What is the probability that your test plans will be inaccurate, incomplete? Give a number to me, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody? Okay. Okay. So, 90%, 70%, 30%, 30%, and 40%. Okay. Same people, don't talk. This is what you think as a group. Again, same question. What is the probability that we're going to have incomplete test plan for the next level? Write that down. Write that down. What is the probability that you have a incomplete test plan? Incomplete test plan or inaccurate test plan for the next level? It doesn't need to be reading like my head right here. Just take it. Anybody else? All right. So we have 20, we have 30, we have 16. And we have 30. And we have 20. Okay, so you start repeating these. It usually takes like 3 circles to reach consensus. Okay? In other words, you want to get to the point where people without conflict, without arguing about the parking space, they reach agreement. And you see like you don't know who responded what. So you see that this person is kind of moving backwards a little bit. And this person is kind of moving away. But you start kind of centralizing in this area. So you start repeating these steps around until you reach consensus. So let's say in a worst case scenario, we have like this. So what would you do then? Thank you for talking about. No, okay. So take a look. At this point, I can engage in a creative conflict, and I'm arguing about either it's 30% or 50%. If I engage in a conversation at this level, I will be basically arguing is it 0.10, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.7. So you go through these steps to make sure that you reach consensus with a minimum of negative energy within the team. All right. This is very useful tool. I use this for estimates in terms of duration, cost, budget, etc. Okay. Another tool that I like to use is a timeline. Basically, you project within a given time period how much risk occurred. And this is on a wall, usually in a kind of common area. You put this kind of flip chart, And team members would come and stick the note if they have an issue. And they would say, this week I have the following issue. So you create like a kind of information radiator area. People come and inform themselves on their own time what's going on within the project. You don't need to pick them up in a meeting and say, what's going on? They can just put it to the post and people can pass by and learn about the stuff from the project. I also like to use the risk timeline, which means I project the risks within my project within the next 2-3 months. At what point we are supposed to anticipate high impact risks, negative risks, positive risks, etc. So you are preparing the team for the future work. And the final thing that I like to measure is the risk severity. What's the risk severity? Usually you allocate risk per deliverable, per task, per user story. And once you're done with that user story or task, the risk is gone, right? But there are certain risks, they stay longer even after you complete the task. So that fact that risk can stay a longer period of time within your project is called risk severity. It combines probability, impact, and that impact over the period of time. So let's say if you compare, like we have a couple of risks here. If you compare these risks like lack of expertise versus change of sponsorship, this change of sponsorship, it's like a one-thing event, but it's going to have a lasting impact on the project throughout the project. Let's say lack of expertise, I can hire somebody and that risk is gone. Are you with me? So when you look at the severity of the project is measured on a scale from 1 to 10. Okay, here's the first part at the end. So here is the, let's say I have a risk. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. All right. What is the, say volunteers, what is the severity of the change requirements? You gave me change requirements. What would be severity of 1 to 10? 1 means like it's a low severity, 10 means it's a lot severity. It's a 6, okay. So 6. How about the lack of resources? Okay, let's say severity is 3. Let's say change of sponsor. That's let's say 8. B is change of priorities. Okay, let's say it's 6. Lack of expertise, let's say that's 3. And then you have no support. Okay, that's 5. So these are the severity factors given to you by stakeholders in a meeting. You can also use mute mapping, etc. to reach agreement with that. Formula to calculate risk severity for your project is equal frequency severity on a second divided by number of risks. So frequency times severity powered by 2 divided by number of risks. So let's say number 6 we have 2 times. So 2 times number 6 on a second plus. We have 3 2 times. 2 times 3 on a second plus. And then we have 8 on a second. And we have 5 on a second. Divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is like a 72. This is like a 18. This is 64. And this is 25. 70 times 18 is 90. 154. 154 plus 25 is 179. Can you calculate 179 divided by 6? Anyway,